Do you think that like we've had past lives and that we've spiritually evolved to this point, or do you think like this is something that we get one life and then?
I mean, come on, dude. That's a rookie question. Of course, we've had thousands of lives,
But not a lot of people think that.
Yeah, I don't know if I believe that.
I think
here's the thing. There's so much irrefutable proof of reincarnation that it's kind of laughable for anybody to not believe in it. Would you agree with that?
I love you. How sweet is that? You're like, no, this is proven. You're like Carl Sagan over there. No, we've got the charts. I mean, obviously, I do believe in it. And like, I have a method for understanding it just based on my own, like, various incarnations in my own life, you know? Like, if you look back at all the phases you've been through and, you know, every single one of you've gone through so many fucking phases.
For sure.
Like, I went through like a mild Smith's phase. I was wearing like a trench coat and shit. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, but to me, it was real. That was almost like a different life. Or like, you know, when I was in high school, certainly my concerns were so different from now, and also like my physical form. So when you look at like just forget like before we're born and after we die, if you just look at the general human existence, there's so many lives in any human life.
Sure.
I mean, people are reincarnating all the fucking time.
Right.
And so I think that, you know, whether or not there's some continuance, I think there is. I know it's not. I don't imagine it to be provable.
I agree with you.
What's the proof you're talking about,
I
Steve?
mean, just like the people who, particularly when they're babies, they'll just like say weird shit and then they'll check it, and, you know, and
yeah, there's that like 4-year-old that like
and
predicted her past death, and they found the place where
like little kids will be looking at pictures and they'll be like, oh well, that's when I was doing this. And they're looking at the picture of like a dead grandfather, and then everything they say checks out. So
yeah, full disclosure. I mean, I agree with you, Duncan. I was just trying to get the clickbait. You know, Duncan Trussell talks about past lives. You know, I mean,
right now.
Holy fuck! Really, you're like the Machiavelli of podcasts. Really? That's awesome, man. Wow.
Here's the problem with reincarnation. I think it's a great number of people are tripped up over this
because of religion.
Well, no, it's there's a numbers problem with it. You know, like if we are reincarnated, then how do you factor in the ever growing population? Are some
I solved it.
Are some souls new and are some souls recycled? And
multiverse.
Yeah, I think sure. I think that when you factor in all of the dimensions that we're not privy to, and then when you factor in the fact that even like a fleeting thought is essentially a life, you know, like there's such. And then,
you guys are like kindred spirits, dude.
And then when you bring into it like the crazy fucking quantum physics shit, where it's like every single possible outcome of every single possible situation is all simultaneously happening, and there is no such thing as right now, and all is right now. Like then it gets really crazy, and you don't have to worry about the numbers game anymore.
Then it works, But that is a valid. Also, God, man, this is like one of the only times I really broke through on DMT at Burning Man. I like did the thing and went into the thing that everyone talks about, and I was in the fucking thing, and you know, but I had this sense of like, oh, I could like completely like obliviate myself here, somehow merge with the universe. Obviously not true. I've never heard of anyone dying on DMT, but that DMT, not a voice, but you know, whatever it is, said, oh, you can always go back. You can always go back to that moment if you want. And then ever since then, I sort of revised my idea of reincarnation being a thing that starts with your birth and ends with your death. And now I see it more as like probably upon like dropping your body, or as they call it in the East, you might be able to like actually choose frames of your incarnation that you want to jump back into and start your life there, meaning that at any given moment, like future versions of you are sort of pouring into the current version of you just to experience life from this point going forward. But you would never know that because it's you, and they just sort of resonate with you. I mean, I think the primitive idea of reincarnation is that you die and you get a break. That's a funny one. Like a lot of New Agers have this spa theory where you fucking get hit by a car and suddenly you're like floating in like some, you know, hyperdimensional spa water. Like, I think the next life I want to be paralyzed from the neck down. That'll be awesome.
Sure.
Really.
The blueprint.
I'm sorry. What if it's not like that? What if it's just you die and you open your eyes and you're like in your 40s going through a divorce? There's no space. There's no rest. There's no anything. And you just have a little deja vu. Or like, what the fuck was that?
Sure.
What happened was you just came back into a new life full amnesia of what you used to be.
Sure. Amnesia is a big deal. And I have no problem with any of that. I want to run by you two things. And I want you to tell me if you think I'm a genius or if this is just completely idiotic. But
what if I already think you're a genius?
Okay, good. I really think I kind of figured something out with this, because the idea of like, how did it all begin? It's just a stupid question. Oh, there was Big Bang. All right, well, what banged? You know, like, okay, there, you come up with something that banged. All right, well, where did that thing come from? You know, you keep going back and like, so the concept of linear time is clearly a flawed idea, right? And I at one point, I was smoking some pot, I was writing an email, and I felt like I figured it out. I said, you know, there was a time when humans thought the world was flat. And they were actually terrified to get in their boats and go too far, because they were legitimately scared that their boat would fall off the end of the world and that they would perish. So then I just equated that. I said, you know, like, I believe we will come to a point where it is equally ridiculous to think of time as flat, such that there's a beginning or an end that you could fall off of, when in fact, just like the world, time is round, dude. You know, it's a cycle. And
I know, man.
I mean, and if you think of it that way, then what was before that? What was before that? Nothing was before that, because it's a fucking cycle. It's round. It doesn't begin or end. And that's one. Yeah. That was one little sort of thought that I had that I was pretty proud of. Now I've got one more, which is that the idea of the body and death. Now, we've heard the saying that we're not human beings having a spiritual experience, but rather we're spiritual beings having a human experience. Yes. Now, to give the idea of like, when we die, we awaken to eternal life, you know, that actually we're eternal, you know, and all of this. I liken, especially because we're multi-dimensional beings. So like we absolutely exist in all of these. We're just not aware of it, because when we incarnate in this physical body, we kind of make a deal that we forget that we're spirits. So we don't know what the fuck's going on. And we certainly do wake up at the moment of death. But now, to look at death and what it really represents, the theory that I came up with was to imagine that the soul, so to speak, is like a fucking like a radio wave kind of a deal. The body is essentially like a radio that picks up that, you know. Now, I think that the flaw in our view of the human brain is that the human brain, the human body, is a generator of consciousness. Yes. You know, like a transmitter. It generates the consciousness like, you know, like a transmitter would. But I don't see it that way. I see the human body, the brain, as a receiver of the signal which is out there. So now, to make it a metaphor, you could take a radio that's like dialed in to like a certain station, like 106.7, right? Yeah. Now you can take that fucking physical radio and you can take a sledgehammer to it. You can smash it. You can destroy it. Destroy that body into oblivion. But you have done nothing to interrupt or kill the signal. So what we are is that we're the receiver of the signal. Yeah. You know, we're the receiver of the signal. You can shoot yourself in the head. All you're doing is killing the radio. You're not fucking with the signal, man. And the signal is forever, dude. And on top of that, there's so many stations, dude. There's limit, and you can plug that station into a different fucking radio later on down the line, and there's your reincarnation and shit.
Yeah, I love it. Yeah, I've thought about this, the receiver idea. It's particularly wrapped around like, you know, when you meet someone who's all puffed up and shit, and it's like, it's a quality of confusion, I think. You know, it's like if there were a sentient radio and it was playing the Beatles, it would be easy for the radio to be like, I'm fucking amazing. Like, literally.
Right.
Totally.
Yeah.
So I think people get a little confused regarding their identity. in that regard.
Oh, dude, that's another great layer on top. That just takes another step further. I fucking love that.
It's entanglement is what they call it. We're entangled in this situation. And yeah, and like in Buddhism, it's this is sort of the map of how to sort of predict what your next life is going to be. What they say is, well, look at what you're doing now, and that'll give you some idea of where you're headed. And it's because it's momentum based essentially. So it's like whatever this particular frequency is, it has this kind of momentum to it. The momentum is karma, and so that momentum has been going on for millennia, incalculable. This was actually one of my like ketamine visions. Was I was seeing my past lives. I couldn't specifically see him, but I knew somehow like what I was looking at was all my past lives. And there were so many of them, and they look like fish eggs kind of floating in space, just all these ways my karma had expressed itself. But yeah, it's like, so this is why there is this emphasis on meditation, and people get confused about the statement, meditation is the preparation for death. And what it means is like, there is an acknowledgement of exactly what you're saying. The body is finite, but there's this sort of transmission that is your soul that's never going to stop. And so when you die, it's I mean, just have you ever met like a healthy, I mean, unless you're like lucky and you just get hit, you're like jogging in a marathon, get hit by a fucking car or something, probably you get sick. When people are dying, they get really sick and confused. Usually they're in a lot of pain. Then they start taking the morphine. Then they sort of like, and if you've seen someone die, it's nuts because they like literally they lift off of that thing you're talking about. Like it's like watching an airplane take off, only it's taking off from time, not the earth. And so they're spiraling through, like they're talking to their mom, and then they're talking to like, somebody that they knew, and you have no idea who they're talking to, but it's because they're spiraling through time because they're breaking free. But but the momentum. So the idea here is like you want to die with some tranquility and some peace, because if you can handle it, which is some of these Tibetan lamas, they describe it as like being in a snowstorm. It's so confusing. So if you can maintain some element of being calm, then there is a possibility of at the very least like having a little bit more control over what your next life might be, instead of it being like what it is for what it is for a lot of people, which is like terrifying. And the description is like suddenly you don't have a body. You've had a body all this fucking time. And it's like, what the fuck? I need a body, because that's what you're familiar with. And then you kind of you impatiently race into your parents, which, by the way, which is something really cool in the Tibetan Book of the Dead, which is what they read to like monks who've died to guide them into the next life. The idea is you see all these people fucking, not to go back to Bang Bus or anything, but it's like you literally see a field within which there's all these people fucking. And it's weirdly like it's like porn. It's like the one that turns you on the most, you go to that. So basically you were watching your parents fuck and you're like, that's fucking hot. I want to get in on that. And you like go into that. And then the next thing you know, you're their kid. And this is wow. This is why in this life we're so into sex and fucking and all that, because it's like that same momentum that brought us here, continues. It's all momentum. It's really fascinating. It's a really fascinating take on what happens when you die.
Can I just tell you how fucked up my new tour is? It's completely multimedia, legitimately X-rated. There's legal waivers all over the venue because I'm actually worried about getting sued. And I don't give a fuck, man, because it's gnarly and it's all the stuff I wasn't allowed to do on Jackass. So get to my fucking website, stevo.com, and get your tickets, man. Especially with this movie coming out, dude. They're all gonna sell, dude, so hurry up while you can get seats. Yee-hoo!